guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my race review for the Dutch Grand Prix. I would actually say it was quite an exciting race after all, which is a pleasant surprise seeing as after the sprint yesterday everybody was a bit worried about what the race would look like today, just because not much happened in the sprint yesterday except for Charles' overtake on Lando. It's a shame that this was the last Dutch Grand Prix for the foreseeable future, because I think it is such a great track with such great fans, and it did deliver a good race today. And it's also a shame that this is how it ended with Max's run here at this track. Unfortunate small driver error, which took him out of the race just because he accidentally got onto the wet side of the track, which is a real shame. But let's get into the predictions I made before the race. I also made these predictions before the news was announced that Liam would be driving in Red Bull and that Yuki would be stepping in Racing Bulls, so just keep that in mind and I'll try to correct myself as I go through. But firstly, for both sprint pole and sprint win, I said Lando Norris, just because he's been in really good form the last couple of races. He's been very fast, and he seemed to have a lot more confidence in the car than he did at the start of the season, and the car is finally not constantly giving up on him or constantly having issues. So the car seems more reliable and he seems very good at driving it and getting the most out of it, which we did see this weekend. We did see it in qualifying for the sprint, but just not quite enough for pole, although he was very, very close, very small margin to George Russell, who ended up actually getting pole. But for that sprint race itself, that car just didn't seem to have a pace at all for Lando or for Oscar. And he did fall behind into P3, but P3 is actually still very good. But obviously it's George who got pole for the sprint and managed to take the win. So it is good to see George slightly back on top, still definitely not as strong as Kimi. And I think he's been stronger than Kimi in qualifying this weekend, which is a good step up. But still overall not as good as Kimi, which is a shame. But for the actual race for pole and P1, I said Kimi Antonelli because, like I said, Kimi has been very strong the whole season and it is stupid to bet against him. He will always be there or thereabouts on a race weekend unless his car has decided to give up on him. It did look, I think he made a mistake in qualifying, which lost him pole, but I think Lando might have gotten it anyway because Lando was very speedy, and it looked from quite a lot of the race that Kimi would be able to win it, but I think Lando's strategy really worked out for him and he was just very speedy the whole time. So it really worked for Lando today, but Kimi was obviously P2 is still a very good result. Let me know down in the comments whether you agree with the Mercedes team orders for George to let Kimi through. I think Kimi definitely would have been able to overtake anyway, so he would have ended up in P2 no matter what. But it's interesting when Kimi had such a big tyre offset and it was so clear that Kimi was going to overtake anyway, but they felt the need for team orders instead of just letting them fight a little bit. So I find that interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. For P2, I said Lando Norris, who obviously ended up here in P1, and then Kimi ended up being P2, so I was pretty close with those two. But for P3, unfortunately, I did say Max Verstappen. I just thought that since he loves this track and it's his home race, and last year that it's on the calendar for the foreseeable future, I thought hopefully he would be able to pull off something magic. But unfortunately, just a bit of bad luck on the opening laps. The track wasn't fully dry and just accidentally took too much curb. But it was quite a nasty crash and I'm glad that he walked away from it okay, and that also Gabby, who did a 360 in the background, managed to save that, because both of those could have been a lot worse than what they were. But obviously it is a shame that Max found himself out of the race so early on and he was unable to see what he could possibly do. Into my surprise predictions. It said that Max will crash out in Q3 but still qualify higher than Isaac. Obviously, I will substitute that with Liam, but it doesn't matter because he didn't crash out in Q3. He did end up crashing out in a race, but there has been a couple times recently where he's just push a car a bit further than its limits, because he's not used to the car's limits being so low down during Q3, and he spun out, but not this weekend. But unfortunately, he did push the car a bit out of its limits in the race and spun out. So that was a shame. I said Mercedes won't be the fastest car overall, which I think is debatable. I'm not actually sure who I would say was the fastest car, like what team, what package. I would say the Mercedes engine was definitely the fastest engine overall this weekend, but I wouldn't say if the Mercedes car was, because obviously they got a double podium, but Lando seemed faster than Kimi, but McLaren definitely wasn't the fastest car in the sprint, and it didn't look that fast in Oscar's hands today, although he did get some beautiful overtakes done, but then he also had a lot of people overtaking him. So I would also be interested to hear your thoughts on that down in the comments below. Who do you think was the fastest car, the fastest package this weekend? I said Fernando Alonso will make it into Q3, and though unfortunately that didn't happen, he managed to get 2 points by finishing P9. Great drive from him. Obviously, it was a bit of a chaotic race, which lends to some random people in the points sometimes, but I think Fernando also did a great drive to be up there, especially because that Aston Martin is not strong at all. It is still, I think, the second slowest team, I would say. I think it is above the Cadillacs now, but only just. I think fighting with like the Hasses and the Williams is where they're like supposed to be. And Fernando putting it in P9 was very impressive and a very good drive. And then my last prediction was that there'd be contact between the two racing bulls. Obviously, when I made this prediction, I was talking about Liam and Arvid, so I will stick to that contact between Liam and Arvid. And when I talk about contact, I mean one of them spinning off or them leaned in to change a front wing because of damage, because of contact. And there was none of that, which is pretty fortunate. They did still manage to find each other on track there, even though they were driving for different teams this weekend, which I find quite funny because they always, no matter how far they qualify away from each other, they always seem to find each other on track and have a little fight. They're both they won't give each other an inch or anybody else an inch when they're fighting on track. So it is interesting to see when they come together how close they get, especially being teammates. It must stress the team out a little bit. But luckily there's been no contact yet, so I don't see any need for like team orders. And obviously they are fighting for points most of the time, but not like a world champion or anything, championship or anything. So I think it is fair to let them race. But those was my debrief for the Dutch Grand Prix. I think we have a week break and then we have a triple header, I believe, which is exciting. So as always, subscribe to be collected for the next race weekend, and I will see you guys around. Bye.